Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Today we're going to be starting the top 100 board games of all time, the 2023 edition. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's talk about the top 100 board games starting from 100 to 91. Before we get into this list, I don't have any honorable mentions or anything like that, but I want to talk about how I'm going to tackle this list as a whole. Starting off, every time we do one of these videos, I'll be talking about 10 games and then my favorite things from those games, whether it be art, specific mechanisms, components, etc. In addition, I have my data from last year that I'm going to say as well, where they were on the previous list, but I won't go into too much detail on them until the end of the video. So if a game dropped significantly on the list or it went up a bunch of ranks, I'll discuss the big movers and changers at the very end. But during the actual video, I'll explain what number they are right now, what number they were last year, and then what that game is, and then my favorite thing from that game. Let's go ahead and start the list with number 100. My number 100 goes to Cockroach Poker Royale. This is a small bluffing game where you have a hand of cards and you're trying to slough them off to all of your opponents. You're doing this by claiming, hey, this is a blank, and everybody else has to say yes, no, or they can look at it and pass it to somebody else. The goal is to try to make one person lose, and that person loses when they have 4 of the same card in front of them, or if they're out of cards and they need to play another one. It's a quick-paced game of bluffing and trying to make sure that you're getting good reads based on the cards in your hand as well as what other players have in front of them, so you can try to force someone into that lose condition. I love the Cockroach Poker Royale version because of the addition of a couple of the special cards, but one key feature is the titular Royals. The Royals have these giant crowns. As you can see, this is a king rat, the Royal, and when you put a card down, you can always say that it's a Royal or whatever suit it is. As you can see, every single suit has a Royal. And if you do end up taking one of the Royals by losing the round, you also take the top card of a penalty stack, and this penalty stack is face up for everyone to see, and it can even lead to a cascade of getting a Royal into a Royal, and it's wild how a giant swing can happen because of this. I love that added pressure and intensity, and as soon as somebody claims with a face down card that that's a Royal, it's terrifying. And you can sort of see the Royals go up as you play, and you can try to figure out, oh my goodness, so that's a Royal, that's a Royal, oh, this can't be a Royal, let's please hope it isn't. And if you get stuck with one, it just stings a little bit more, but it adds to that tension, which I appreciate in the game. That's my number 100, that is Cockroach Poker Royale, number 24 last year. My number 99 goes to the Gallerist. Number 76 last year, this has you playing as owners of an art gallery. You're going to be using worker placement to take actions to find artists, promote those artists, and then sell their paintings or sculptures or 3D art for however much you can. You can also sell them to a global market for some auctions for additional paintings at the end of the game, and try to complete lots of mini objectives along the way. My favorite part about this game, though, is the graphic design and the integration of the theme to everything. And this game makes sense. Every single action is connected, but in a logical way. If you have an artist, you're going to hire them at a specific value, but if they get more famous because you've already hired them, obviously you're not going to have to pay more for the work that you've already paid for them, but you are going to get more dividends for the paintings that you're selling from them. The graphic design on the boards makes sense. You have spots for your different action cards. When you play something, you get a bonus, and then when it flips, you retrieve that character and it reveals something else. I love how it's organized, structured, and it's the best pairing of theme and mechanisms at such a heavy level, but making it approachable for gamers of every type. Love the Gallerist. That is my number 99. My number 98 goes to Arboretum. Number 75 last year, Arboretum has you creating a tableau in front of you while also participating in hand management. You'll be drawing 2 cards every single turn and then playing a card in your Arboretum and then discarding one. And you're trying to put them in an order from least to greatest, passing through starting with the same color. So for example, this 1 purple here could trace a line all the way up to this 8 purple here because the first and last one match. However, you're only going to actually score these if you have the most of that specific color in your hand at the end of the game. And that's my favorite part of this whole game, is the hand management. There's varied editions of this, so that's why the art's a little bit different, but the core gameplay is the same, where you have this tough decision and only 7 cards in your hand that you're constantly managing and trying to prepare for that end game scoring. Are you holding on to specific numbers just so others can't have them, or are you tossing things out for everybody else just to ensure that you're getting the best scoring you can with your board? I love the mind games that go into this, using the discard pile as sort of a second hand, something I love in games in general, having multiple areas where you're able to pull resources from, and I think Arboretum does it extremely well. That is my number 98, Arboretum. My number 97 goes to Gloomhaven. This is a dungeon crawling game where you're using an actual hand management system, very similar to something like Arboretum, but in this case, your hand is dwindling as the game goes on. You'll use your action cards to propel through a dungeon, fighting enemies, using special abilities and powers in a large campaign setting. After every mission, you'll be able to get some experience, level up, buy items, and then as you progress, your characters can level up, get new cards into their attack modifier decks, and then also you'll be able to eventually retire them, unlocking even more characters. That's one of the driving forces in this game that keeps you coming back, is that trickle of XP and the promise of something new that eventually will come. And my favorite part about this game is also the hand management. The cards are so much fun because they have two different halves, and they also have basic versions on both halves as well. You can do something that is active, something that's immediate, something that is a little bit weaker, but you'll get to keep on recurring it, and some of the cards will feature this X symbol that are essentially your superpowers. When you play a card with an X symbol, you get to do something amazing, but then that card is removed for the rest of the scenario. So if you're playing those large attacks all the time, you're going to run out of cards super quickly. So it's so much fun to decide when is the best time to play these cards to get max value out of them, and you feel so cool the whole time you do so. You're constantly managing your resources and trying to make sure that those cards are going to last for the scenario, because when you run out, you are out. And that is no bueno. You want to make sure that you are putting your best foot forward. So I love this one. That is number 97. Number 84 last year, that is Gloomhaven. My number 96 goes to Sky Mines. This is a new one to the list, one of my favorites from this past year. It's an Alexander Pfister game where you are focused on climbing up different stock tracks. You do this through a worker placement and card reveal system where you're going to be using different icons to put influence out on a main board. You're investing into different companies and placing pieces out for companies, but everyone can invest in every company, so it's up to you to make sure you're putting your money into the best places. The whole game is driven by my favorite mechanism, the card system. Every single player has their own player area where they're going to take cards, put them face down, and then reveal them, and then throughout the round, you'll be flipping them face down to activate their powers, whether it be investing in companies, buying new cards for your hand, increasing your potential hand size, or giving yourself little objectives that you can complete along the way for an additional point revenue stream. I love all the choices in this game and how the icons make sense on the cards, and the linchpin here, the king of it, the coolest thing about this is once you've done and used all of your cards, you have to take one of your discard piles that's on the top of your board back into your hand, and then every card that you played is going to go into each separate discard pile. So if you played 4 cards, you're putting all 4 of those cards into separate discard piles, which means you're setting up your future turns. You're never going to have that same turn again, so use it while you can, discard things appropriately, and plan for the future based on where you're discarding and what sort of hands you want to make. Your cards you're playing now, what you're doing in the future, those little objectives that you're purchasing, all of that is tied together so well. That is Sky Mines, my number 96. My number 95 goes to Imperial Settlers Empires of the North. 72 last year. This is a civilization building game where you are going to be trying to use your deck the best you can to gain victory points by playing cards, using combos, and then using your function of your society or your civilization the best that you can. Each of them is going to have their own unique playstyle, and it's up to you to figure that out, do it well, and make tough decisions on which cards to play now, which cards to play later, and which cards to reserve in your hand for future rounds. I love the entire system of this one, but my favorite part of it is the uniting mechanism of the game, and that is the island decks. As you play, you're going to be able to create ships and send them out on explorations, and if you put one of these axes on them, they can go and conquer one of these cards. And this deck of cards is shuffled up and randomly distributed, and so you're not sure what cards are going to be out each game and how those cards are going to affect your character's strategy. I love getting a card that just seems to fix one of the flaws that one of your characters may have, or something that allows you to veer off into a strategy you may never have thought of before. It's so much fun to see what sort of, not chaos, but interesting variability comes from these island cards, and there's always something to explore in Imperial Settlers Empires of the North. So that is my number 95. My number 94 goes to Nidavellir. Number 62 last year. This is a bidding game. tableau building game of a variety of scoring. You are going to be assembling a group of dwarfs to go and defeat the giant dragon Fafnir. So you do this through recruiting people at taverns, and you'll do that by putting coins face down on this board in front of you. Whoever reveals the biggest coin is going to be able to add a new person into their line first, picking from the respective tavern, and then you're going to try to score the most points at the end by having these gigantic lines of people with the amount of banners. You also have this cool system where you're able to transfer your coins into bigger coins if you play a zero cost. So yes, you're going to lose this current round's auction, but your future auctions are going to improve. Now, my favorite part about this game, though, has to do with the middle scoring. So at the very middle of the game, you are going to win majorities for having the most banners of each type. Now, you get additional bonuses at the end of each complete set that you have, but if you specialize in one specific area, you're going to get an additional bonus during that midpoint, and this can be game winning. For example, your coin that you can use, no longer it is a 0 that changes your money out, it's now a 3, or you can just +5 one of your coins for free. You get an automatic always wins tiebreaker token. You get additional scoring symbols, or you get to look at 3 cards that were discarded and play an extra character. I love chasing for these because it can be a big swing that you might need, whether it be this blue getting you additional symbols, which can push you to a hero, or winning ties means that your game plans are a lot harder to stop in the future rounds. I love the entire system around this and the pressure that it puts on players on what specific characters that they're going for, and the competition that adds to different players bidding in specific tavern pools. That's my number 94, Nidavellir. My number 93 goes to Architects of the West Kingdom. Number 40 last year. This is a worker placement game where you are sending out your gigantic horde of workers out onto the board to gain resources and build cards and try to get the most points. Now, the gameplay has you sending out a single worker at a time, and when you do, you'll gain resources at that location based on how many people you have there. So if you put out one worker to a wood spot, you get 1 wood, but if you put out your third, so you've had 2 there already, you will get 3 wood. And this is pretty much how all the worker placement spots work, but there's obviously going to be some differences. There's a constant choice between whether it's maximizing on the workers you already have on the board or disrupting the plans of others through the use of things like arrest mechanisms or putting yourself forward when it comes to building or recruiting new townsfolk and bolstering an engine. So you have this cool engine building that's from cards that you're collecting and things you're building for your point style, but you're also focused on this temporary engine of your workers that are at the sites actually gaining resources for you. But my favorite part about this game, though, is what you're spending those resources on, and that's the cards. At the very beginning, you're going to get to draft a hand of cards, and this sort of gives you a game plan going into the first couple of rounds. They have conditions on what sort of townsfolk you need to have in order to build them, specific resources that are required, and then special abilities that you get for playing them. They're also going to have points at the worst at the end. So some are instant abilities, some are endgame scoring, some are passive bonuses that you could benefit from. And the expansion, The Age of Artisans, adds an additional way to bolster those buildings that you've created, giving you even more an incentive to actually build them. So they're the adornments that slide on the top, giving you additional bonuses, resources, or powers. I love everything about the Age of Artisans expansion. It's my preferred way to play. So that is my number 93, Architects of the West Kingdom. My number 92 goes to Junk Art, one of my favorite dexterity games where you're going to be stacking up these weird, funky blocks as best as you can while trying to score points in a variety of ways. Your location will dictate the rules of the current round, and you'll play through 3 of these locations trying to earn fans. And you do this by placing pieces onto a base, and these pieces seem to be engineered in a way that they stack in unique special ways, and they have some pieces that have special relationships with others, and it's something you sort of discover as you play, trying to stack in a variety of ways. My favorite part about this game, though, are the different locations that you'll be playing at, giving you different rules that you'll play by. For example, in Paris, you're playing on just a single base that you'll put into the center, and everybody's trying to stack on this central one. Or some of the challenges will have you building on your own base. Some will have you building on 2 bases at once, and maybe you'll have to get up and switch and move. Some will have you using your cards in sort of a trick-taking style in order to bid for pieces. There's a lot of options with the combination of the pieces, the locations, and then these cards that are actually matching each of the unique pieces. So you'll have this deck of cards that also has, for example, this weird shape right here will be on a card of that specific color, and there's 4 of those colors. So there's a lot of creativity that's been put into the location cards to make unique mini games that work well and use all of these these pieces in fascinating ways. I enjoy the entire arc of the game as you have those 3 separate events, and you're never out of it completely. There's always a chance to get more fans down the line, and then hopefully you'll be able to claim that victory at the end of the whole experience. So that is my number 92. Its first year on the list, this is Junk Art. Finishing off this section of the list, we have my number 91, Root. Number 34 last year, this is a game of woodland warfare. You take control of a unique asymmetric woodland faction, whether it be birds or cats or these cute adorable mice, and you'll be trying your best to gain victory points based on your faction's abilities and powers. There's a lot of shared mechanisms that propel the game. Movement, battle, as well as destroying enemy tokens are going to generate you points as well, and you're trying to use all of your resources at hand to manipulate the battlefield to put you on top. And one of my favorite parts about this game is another shared mechanism, and that is the deck. So the deck of cards is filled with this beautiful art by Kyle Farron, one of my favorite arts in games, period. And this one has you playing with unique suits that all have special abilities that work differently for each of the factions. So my faction might use these bird cards different than yours, but the general idea is that the suits relate to the different locations on the board. So there's a fox clearing, and that means that you're going to be able to use the fox cards to usually take actions in that area. And then the bird is going to be a wild for most of the different factions. But you also get to use the cards for their crafting pieces. So there's this little symbol on the top here that shows what sort of crafting buildings you need to have, and then you can either gain special abilities for your faction or build these items for temporary victory points that other players can interact with this. I love this so much because it offers this customization with the different items on the bottom here that work for all of the different factions by sliding them under your board, but you're never sure what the characters are going to be using the cards for, to build for that crafting, to use for their own separate actions, or maybe they're holding an ambush in case they get attacked for some key battle moment. That's my number 91, Root. And that's it. That's the first portion of the list here, my 100 through 91 of my favorite board games of all time, as of 2023, of course. Now, before we close off the video, I do want to quickly talk about the list and some things that moved and changed, starting off with Cockroach Poker. It had a major drop from 24 to 100, and I think that has to do with the introduction of Spicy to the library. You'll see it later down the list, I'm sure, but it sort of replaced the game for me and has shown me a little bit of the flaws with Cockroach Poker Royale. In Cockroach Poker Royale, there are some moments, particularly in the higher player count games, where you can just be not in it because people aren't passing you cards because it is completely player controlled, and that's something that the cadence of something like Spicy fixes, where everyone is always engaged at all times, and I think it's a big important thing for these small simple card games like this. The other big drop was for Root, actually, and I think it has to do with a couple of negative plays that I had recently, as well as the overall fact that there's a lot of downtime in the game, and it's something that's hard to break away from, particularly in higher player counts. You're following this basically huge menu of actions for your different phases, and yours are different, and you do have to make sure you're following them all. So you'll look at your board and say, okay, I gotta do this first, okay, check that, check that, check that, and that can be a bit of a process, particularly at higher player counts. My favorite way to play this is 3-player, just to avoid that, but the 4-player games do have a lot of cool things to offer with the interaction of the different factions. And we had 2 new games that entered the list for the first time this year with Sky Mines and Junk Art. So Sky Mines just came out, but Junk Art we've had in the library for a while, and I think that Junk Art is pretty dang awesome, and I'm happy that it was able to be on the list this year. It's one of my favorites when it comes to stacking in general, and I think it's a great option for your library if you're looking for something that's unique in that genre. So that is Junk Art and Sky Mine's new entries to the list. We'll go ahead and close out the video here, but thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.